Our topic today is using our God-given common sense. Common sense is level-headedness. It's making good judgments. It's seeing things the way that they are and doing what needs to be done. And common sense is practical, but is there anything spiritual about it? The spiritual comes in really seeing things as they are. It's a much bigger job than we might imagine. Seeing things clearly is a spiritual lesson of lifetimes. Swami Kriyananda for many years taught yoga asanas. And he was asked, what is the best yoga posture? And he said, it's the one that makes you stand on your own 2 feet. And we've told you in the past about Saint Teresa of Avila in Spain, and how she started many convents. And with the new novices, she would look for common sense, that they arrived already with common sense. She said, devotion they can learn later, but if they don't have common sense, they'll never progress. And this is the starting place. Swamiji said, words, no matter how inspired, even though appearing in the scriptures, are only words. The scriptures, the rituals, can be used for lofty purposes or can be used for selfish purposes. But they're no substitute for practical, direct experience. In the Gita, also, Sri Krishna tells us, to the knower of Brahman, the Vedas are of no more use than a well when the land all around is in flood. We need to live by the light of the scriptures, but then ultimately all indirect knowledge falls away, even the scriptures. Yogananda Ji went to the U.S. 100 years ago this year when he was invited by the Congress of Religious Liberals, and he went representing Hinduism. And he could have talked about Hindu beliefs, he could have explained some of the Gita, and also his guru, Sri Yukteswar, was a Gyan avatar, gave scriptural interpretation, spiritual knowledge. Yogananda Ji paints a beautiful picture of how he absorbed his guru's wisdom when he said that all-night discourses in the ashram were not rare. And then after such a discourse, then the sun rose. And Sri Yukteswar would calmly say, it is dawn. Let's walk by the Ganga. But Yogananda Ji did not follow his guru's example when he went to the U.S. No, he called his discourse the science of religion. And he brought a supremely practical teaching to apply to every part of daily life, a teaching of common sense. And in that discourse on the science of religion, he said in simple words that we all want happiness, to avoid pain, and the way to do that is to seek the divine. And this discourse was a breath of fresh air. It was very well received. He published it, and he remained in the U.S. and taught. And for several years, he gave discourses in the largest auditoriums in the major cities across the country. And he was the most popular public speaker of his time. It was a very public mission. And he always gave people not theory, not much yoga philosophy. He gave them direct experience. At Carnegie Hall in New York once, to an audience of 3,000 people, he didn't give them a theoretical discourse. Rather, he led them for an hour and a half, singing just one chant, "O God, beautiful," that he translated from Guru Nanak's song. And afterwards, there were many people had healings, had miraculous experiences. And the foundation stone of his teachings, those very practical energization exercises to control, to direct the energy in the body, to heal the body, and draw that energy into the spine. He trained his disciples also to be strong individuals. He didn't do their work for them. In the Depression in the 1930s, there was not much money. The ashram didn't have much food. One disciple talked about how they planted tomatoes on the hillside, and they had tomato salad, and they had tomato soup, and they had fried tomatoes, and they did everything they possibly could with those tomatoes. Now, Yoganandaji was an avatar. He had powers. He could have made life much easier for his disciples. But he displayed those powers only rarely because he taught his disciples common sense and to be strong in themselves. And his disciples lived by those same principles. Rajarsi Janakananda was a self-made, very successful businessman. His parents were simple farmers. When he was a young man, he was already a multimillionaire and the head of the largest insurance company in Western U.S. Yet he was also Guruji's chief disciple, and he was God realized. Sister Gyanamata, her book God Alone, is full of supremely practical advice to love God, do Kriya Yoga, to serve. And Swami Kriyananda, supremely practical and active, just his name, Kriyananda, bliss through action, and showed us how to apply these teachings in every aspect of life, no matter what your interest. Years ago, Swamiji was in the hospital in Gurgaon, and he was very ill. It could well have been, for all we knew, that he was on his deathbed. And when he was there, he said to us, "This is not my work. It's not your work. It's Babaji's work. It's a new infusion of light into the world. We can choose to cooperate with this ray of cosmic consciousness or not. And if we don't take up the challenge, Babaji will find others who will. But if we do attune ourselves spiritually, there are great blessings awaiting us. There's wonderful opportunities for everyone who embarks on the spiritual path. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm also going to start with the quote from the Gita that Keshava already quoted. To the knower of Brahma, the Vedas are no more use than a well when the land all around you is in flood. I think Krishna was telling us here, we need to experience the truth, not just read about it. There's a wonderful story of the great Saint Francis of Assisi, who lived in the 13th century. He was one of the Christianity's greatest saints. And he took a vow of poverty, and he and his band of followers, his fellow monks, they had no money. They would beg for alms every day. And there was a blind woman once that knew he was walking by her on the street one day, and she begged from him, and she couldn't see that he obviously had nothing. And so when she begged from him, he really wanted to give her something. And he thought, oh, it's too bad, I have nothing to give her. And then he remembered he had one thing, a very small copy of the Bible that he kept next to his heart, that he'd been memorizing and reading for years and years and years. And he remembered he did have that. So he gave her his Bible and thought that maybe she could, sell it for a few coins or something. And after she had gone, he cried. And he cried to the Lord and said, Lord, I've given away your word. And he suddenly heard the Lord say back to him, Saint Francis, I have planted my word in your heart. You have no more need of a mere copy of it. So that's what we want to do. We want to plant. We want to have the Lord plant the words of the Gita, of the Bible, of the great scriptures onto our hearts. And we want to take everything that we read within the scriptures deeper and deeper into our own self and have an experience of it, an experience of God, rather than just keep it in the book, just keep it as I'm sitting here reading the scriptures. I remember for many, many years before I found this path, I made it a great habit of reading. I read scriptures. I had grown up reading the Bible, but also as I got older, I read many other books and just many, many spiritual books. And I kept thinking that I was advancing on the path because I was reading so many spiritual, wonderful books. And even though I would feel a stirring in my heart as I was reading them, I could close my eyes and contemplate the words for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And I felt like, wow, these are just so important, these words. And I want to memorize them. I want to live them. And yet, I could never really bring them into myself. They sort of always stayed external to me. And it wasn't until I learned to meditate and draw my energy inside and learned how to take the truth inwardly that I was able to actually experience them. And, Master has said to us that self-realization will be the religion of the future. And I can understand that because people can only take scriptures or external rituals and religion so far. In fact, I'm sure we know priests and pundits that can quote the scriptures backward and forward, but they have no love in their hearts. And it also, when you're having no experience of God within, but just quoting scriptures right and left, people can become fanatics. They can become dogmatic. They can be prejudiced, and they can be racist. And all of this in the name of God and in the name of the scriptures. So who do we follow? We followed the great ones who have lived the scriptures in their lives, the great saints. Both Jesus Christ and Yogananda Ji and all our great masters, they said, if you follow these teachings that we give you, you can have the same experience I'm having. This is what I've done. It's worked for me. You should try it. It will work for you. Jesus used to say that to all his followers. And in fact, one of the great priests of his time, Nicodemus, who was a Sanhedrin priest in the temple at Jerusalem, came and asked Jesus a question. He actually was very open to Christ's teachings, but he came and asked Jesus a point of spirituality, of the religion, of the scriptures. And Jesus explained it to him, and then he said, how is it that you don't know these things? You're a great master of Israel. How can you not know these things? And he said, we speak of that which we know. I have experienced it, and therefore I know the truth. So that truth has to live within us. And Jesus also said, by their fruits you shall know them. By the way people live is to know whether or not they have experienced this truth in their heart. So, speaking of common sense, let's ask ourselves, are we experiencing the divine within? Just ask ourselves. We need to do, this is self-expression, self-realization. We need to be able to realize within our own selves. And so are we experiencing peace in meditation? Are we feeling our hearts more open in love for God, in love for Divine Mother, of Guru? Are we feeling like we want to get closer and closer to God? Are we yearning for that oneness? Are we yearning for that longness? That oneness, that union? Because we can't just follow teachings blindly. This is what the great masters warn against. Do not follow with blind belief. This is how false prophets, this is what Jesus was doing when he said, a good tree will bear good fruit. A corrupt tree will bear evil fruit, and by their fruits you will know them. But what he was doing was warning against false prophets. Perhaps it's gurus that want to take all the power to themselves and not point it back towards God. And so we have to ask ourselves, when somebody says something like, meditation will transform your life, you have to say, is that true for me? Or if they say, get over likes and dislikes, it will really help you in your life. You'll see what it does for you. So, do we try to get over likes and dislikes, to center our energy, to get over our reactions? Contemplate that. Does that help me? Has it helped me in my life? Or being around spiritual people, having spiritual satsang, attuning ourselves to the Guru. Has that led me towards God? Has that led me towards greater happiness? We have to ask ourselves these very practical questions. Otherwise, we're just following with blind belief. God's truth is ever new. It's ever new in our meditations. It's ever new in nature, with the seasons, with the snowflakes. Every snowflake is new. And within our hearts, truth should be ever new. We should be, in every meditation, or at least every day, finding some connection with God and making it real for us within ourselves. Then this little teeny seed of truth can grow into a vast tree. And soon that, suddenly there's a tree of wisdom and tree of discrimination and common sense and light that we can share with others. And it takes incarnations of sincere seeking to bring us to a true path. That will magnetize us to a teaching such as a teaching of self-realization, a teaching of Kriya Yoga, that will magnetize us to an enlightened Guru. And God manifests himself ever new with the gurus, with the masters. They come again and again. The great avatars, they come again and again. Ever new, God refreshes himself to share their teachings with us. And they give us their teachings, and they leave us behind their vibration. And they tell us what to do. And they say, follow me. And it's by the fruits. How do we know if their teachings are true? By the fruits. What are their fruits? Many times, that is their disciples. And when we think of Yogananda Ji's disciples, the first one that comes to my mind is Swami Kriyananda. What incredible fruit that Yogananda Ji left us when he gave us Swami Kriyananda as a disciple. And all of us, we are the fruit of our gurus. And so what are we going to bring forth also? During the Last Supper, Jesus Christ said to his disciples, he said, everything my Father has shown me, I have shown you. As my Father has loved me, I have loved you. And now you must love one another as I have loved you. And he said, you have not chosen me. I have chosen you to go and bear more fruit, to give forth good fruit. And so I believe that that is our highest dharma. We need to experience these truths within our own heart, not just in the scriptures. We have to live these truths. That's why also meditation is so important, Kriya Yoga is so important. It helps us go inward enough and uplift our consciousness enough that we can actually experience God's presence. Meditation and service. That's what Yogananda said. We experience God in meditation and we serve others by sharing that light, that love, that joy, that wisdom. Whatever we're experiencing, we share. And then we become, like Swami Kriyananda, good disciples. We become like the disciples of Christ. We go out and we give forth good fruit. Joy to you.